Hello, everybody. Welcome to our program. This is English Digest, and I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
It's our News Digest unit. It's also our all-English lecture, so watch out for that. No Chinese here to rely on, although I'm sure your listening comprehension skills are getting better day by day, so you won't need the crutch of a Chinese teacher today. Now, what's our subject for today's lesson, Stephanie?
Oh, we're talking about a really sad story, actually. I'm sure some of our listeners, maybe all of our listeners, if you're into the news, you saw this because it was everywhere. There was a lady in the country of Iran, which is in the Middle East. They have an Islamic culture where the men are in charge, and she loved football. She loved soccer. And there was an unwritten rule in Iran saying women couldn't go into the stadiums and watch the games or watch the matches, as they're called in soccer. Well, what she did is she kind of disguised herself, so she dressed up like a guy and went to the football stadium and watched them play. She was known as the Blue Girl because those were the colors of her favorite soccer team. Well, they found her, they jailed her, they put her in jail, and after 3 days, she was released on bail. We'll talk about what those words mean. And then she found out after she'd been released that she would probably have to spend between 6 months to 2 years in prison, and she decided she couldn't handle that. And she went and stood outside the courthouse, and she poured gasoline all over her body and set herself on fire. We're going to talk about what that means. So anyway, it's a very sad story, but it got a lot of people talking about freedom.
It did. So It's all about the blue girl in Iran here. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. She protested kind of in using suicide there, which we'll get to in just a second.
Yeah.
But I think I read later that they're now letting women in because of what she did. So at least her death was not in vain. So let's get to it. Let's read through the entire contents of today's lesson, and we'll be right back to talk about it. An Iranian woman arrested for attempting to sneak into a football stadium disguised as a man died last fall after self-immolating in protest. Sahar Kodayari, also known as Blue Girl after the colors of her favorite soccer team, was jailed for 3 days before being released on bail. Upon learning she could spend 6 months to 2 years in prison, Kodayari set herself on fire outside the courthouse and later succumbed to her injuries. Since 1981, Iran has banned female spectators from attending sports events. Though not written into law, the ban is enforced by the country's authorities. Therefore, women have no choice but to disguise themselves as men to cheer on their favorite teams. It has also led to the Opium Stadiums movement, a campaign that started 15 years ago, urging governing bodies like FIFA to intervene against Iran's violation of human rights. Needless to say, Kodayari's death sparked outrage all over the world, generating conversations about how women in Iran are treated. Other feminist movements in Iran have also garnered plenty of attention over the years, including the fight against the mandatory hijab. With the help of social media, Masi Alinahad, a journalist who fled Iran, started the movement #MyStealthyFreedom to invite women to post images of themselves in public without a hijab. This was later followed by another campaign encouraging women to wear white scarves on Wednesdays as a symbol of protest against the dress code. Although the battle for gender equality is far from over, a great many women in Iran are getting bolder and speaking up against the country's sexist laws in hopes that one day they will no longer be treated as second-class citizens.
Okay, guys, we're going to be talking about a sad story, but hopefully some good will come from it. I mean, that's all you can wish, is that out of tragedy comes something better. But we've got a blue girl. She was called the Blue Girl because of the colors of her favorite soccer team. A lot of sports teams, actually all sports teams, are represented by certain colors. My favorite basketball team is the Phoenix Suns. I grew up in that area, and their colors are purple and orange. I know that most all of you know what your favorite sports team's colors are. Of course, the Yankees are blue. Navy blue, that is, and white. Tom, what's your favorite sports team's colors?
I don't really have a favorite, but I guess I follow the Minnesota Wild NHL team. It's a hockey team. Their colors are, what are they? Red, white, and green, actually.
And typically, if you're a sports fan, right, you go and you watch their games and you dress up in those colors.
True.
Because, you know, you have a lot of team spirit, we call it. Well, this blue girl is referred to as the blue girl. A lot of people can't pronounce her name or don't remember her name, but when they say blue girl, everyone knows we're talking about this particular woman that we're going to share with you in this first paragraph. What happened to her? What her experience was?
Well, she was arrested for attempting to sneak into a football stadium disguised as a man, and she died last fall after self-immolating in protest. So that's what happened to her. She tried to sneak into a football stadium dressed as a man. So, of course, here we've got the word sneak, which means you try to go into some place without being seen. When I was in high school, we still had drive-in movies, and sometimes we tried to sneak into the drive-in movies. Someone would drive the car in first and pay for the ticket there, but then we would sneak in from the backside of the theater outdoors and then get in the car. That was many years ago, of course. There are no more drive-in movie theaters anywhere, I believe. But yeah, we sneaked in. I think you can also say snuck in. That's also correct for past of the verb to sneak. And usually with the preposition into. Sneak into something. So some people try to sneak into movie theaters. You were probably a good girl. You probably never tried to sneak into
I didn't
a movie
do that.
theater. Yeah, you wouldn't do that. But this woman wanted to see her favorite team play. And they didn't allow women in. So she sneaked into the football stadium disguised as a man. Disguise here, I just touched on that. It means that you wear a certain set of clothing in order to look like someone else, especially if you're trying to say fool the police or something. Like if you commit a crime, you'll try to disguise yourself so you don't get caught. Maybe grow a beard, wear glasses or something like that.
Yeah, a lot of celebrities don't like to be recognized outside when they're just doing normal everyday things like going and buying some groceries. So they'll put on a wig or sunglasses, a funny nose, things like that to disguise themselves. Here, she disguised herself as a man and died last fall after self-immolating in protest. To immolate yourself or to be self-immolating means you set yourself on fire, which just sounds like the most painful way to die that there is. Besides being eaten alive by some animal, you know.
Or tortured to death.
Oh.
In a Turkish prison or something like that.
But burning is so painful.
Yes, that was kind of common in Vietnam. Lots of Buddhist monks would self-immolate in protest against the government or something like that.
It's a cultural thing.
There are lots of famous pictures of monks burning themselves. Actually, self-immolating means you commit suicide, but it's usually done by setting yourself on fire, especially if it's in protest, self-immolating in protest. And what's her name? Well, it's Sahar Kodayari, also known as Blue Girl. She, of course, was called that because of the colors of her favorite team. So she was called that after her favorite team. The word after here means that it represents something like, oh, I was named after my uncle. Okay, that's my name. My name's Tom. My uncle's name was Tom, so I was named after him, for example.
She was jailed for 3 days when they caught her, and then she was released on bail. You'll see these words, released on bail, if you're reading a newspaper or watching TV news. What happens is someone is arrested, but before they go on trial and, evidence is given to prove that they're guilty or innocent, they don't have to stay in jail if they have money that they can pay to guarantee that they will definitely show up when their trial is set to go. So, yeah, if they escape and disappear after they've been released on bail, that money is never given back. Some of the people who are quite wealthy, I've heard of some people who have bail that's set at like $5 million, something crazy. A lot of people who don't have money for bail actually just have to stay in jail until their trial comes.
And get fed really horrible food and be allowed to go to the restroom at very limited times. But in any case,
I wanted to mention, though, bail is also 10% of whatever number you hear. So no one's actually paying $5 million. They're paying 5% of that.
Okay, yeah, your father was a
10%,
lawyer, so you would know that kind of stuff. But she was released on bail. She did have to spend 3 days in jail, though.
Yeah.
And upon learning, or when she learned that she could spend 6 months to 2 years in prison, she might spend that time in prison, she decided to set herself on fire outside the courthouse and later succumbed to her injuries. That was certainly not a pleasant way to go. She set herself on fire, self-immolated, and a few days later, or a while later, she succumbed to her injuries in this particular case, and that means that she died because of her burns, which must have hurt like heck.
Oh, yeah. I've heard there's nothing more painful than burns. It's just horrible. And a lot of the burn patients, they actually have to make them unconscious. They give them something so they're not even conscious. It's so painful. So, yeah, don't try this, guys. So, since 1981, that was a long time ago, Iran has banned female spectators from attending sports events. So, a spectator is someone who is watching whatever's happening. It's a word that's very close to an old word, an old-fashioned word, spectacles. Before we called our glasses or eyeglasses, we called them spectacles. So a spectator is just a person who is watching something. It's usually a big event. Could be a sports game, a concert, whatever, but they're not participating. Those are participants. A spectator is just watching something that's happening.
Exactly. So the law there actually prevented them from attending those. But actually, it says it wasn't a law, but it was like, I guess, a ban from the government. They just said this. So though not written into law, the ban is enforced by the country's authorities. So maybe some religious leader like the Ayatollah Khamenei said that no women can attend soccer matches. I herefore decree based on my interpretation of the scriptures. So yes, it was enforced by the authorities of the country. The leaders, they said, yep, we can't send women to soccer matches. Sorry, girls, you can't go. You're going to have to stay home. Maybe you can watch it on TV or listen to your husband tell you all about it. But no, you can't go. And if we talk about enforcing the law, that means the government punishes people when they commit those crimes. And sometimes people, of course, complain about, say, people who break the law all the time. Hey, why are all those scooters running the red lights? Well, it's because the law is not being enforced. The police are not stopping people when they commit that crime. That's probably one cause of traffic accidents. They're not enforcing the law. Again, that's maybe somebody's opinion, not necessarily mine.
Yeah, right now, guys, is a good time to take a break, right?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
No Chinese teacher, guys, but we are going to take a quick break. Tom and I are going to go get some cookies and something fun to drink, and then we'll be back.
Okay, let's continue with today's lesson. It's our News Digest unit. We're talking about soccer in Iran. Can the ladies go watch and cheer along with the men? Apparently, no. At least that was the case in the past. I believe they changed the law recently, probably because of the sacrifice that the blue girl made when she set herself on fire in protest. And I guess she was doing that because she was like unhappy with the way the law was. Hey, we girls like to cheer on our teams as well. Why can't we go?
Yeah, you could really say she sacrificed her own life to try to help the women in her country have more freedom to live their lives the way they want to. So we know that since 1981, this country, Iran, has banned female spectators from attending sports events. And like Tom said, it's not actually in the law. It's not written down anywhere, but they act like it is. It must have been probably one of their religious leaders who said, we're not going to let women into these things. They started to enforce this ban. To enforce just means you make sure that if someone disobeys the law or breaks the law, that they pay the penalty. They are punished for that. A lot of laws we have aren't enforced very strongly. For example, I know a lot of scooter laws, kids who are riding these scooters or adults, riding the scooters, they often break the traffic laws.
They do?
They do.
I'm so shocked by that.
I know.
How could that happen?
I don't know. And they're never pulled over or given a ticket. So we know that a lot of the laws in countries aren't enforced. Or maybe sometimes, the police will feel like enforcing the law and sometimes they won't. So it happens in all countries. So it says women in this country of Iran didn't have any choice. They had to disguise themselves as men if they wanted to go and cheer on their favorite teams. Notice this verb phrase, cheer on. We often use it when we're talking about going to a sports event. Or maybe friends who are supporting you at some sort of, maybe you have a competition or even you have a concert or something. They cheer you on from the audience. You'll often see those two words together.
You certainly will, and it also has led to the open stadiums movement. And what is that, you might be asking? Well, that's a campaign that started 15 years ago, urging governing bodies like FIFA to intervene against Iran's violation of human rights. So the open stadiums movement, they're urging governments and governing bodies like FIFA to intervene. You guys got to do something. FIFA, of course, is the international organization of football. Is it Fédération Internationale de Football Association or something like that? I don't speak French, but that's my best guess here. Basically, the International Federation for Association Football is how you would translate that into English. Football has many forms: rugby, American style, Canadian style, and, of course, soccer, which is called association football. That's where the word soccer comes from, SOC, soccer, that's why we call it that in the United States.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But in any case, yes, FIFA is the governing body of football throughout the world, and people were saying, hey, you guys got a lot of power. You are the guys that organize the World Cup tournaments every 4 years. Surely you must be able to do something against those violations of human rights in Iran. You should allow the women to get into those games and cheer just like anybody else. So the verb here is to intervene, which means you kind of come in and help out a situation if you're a figure of authority. So maybe your son and the neighbor kid, they're fighting or something, and then you decide to intervene. Well, yes, maybe they should fight it out and work out their problems themselves, but now they might hurt themselves, so I'm going to have to step in here and stop them. I'm going to intervene. I'm going to interrupt and stop your fight.
It often happens, yeah. Sometimes you have to intervene if two little kids are fighting, an adult has to get involved. That's another word, involved. Intervene, though, always makes you feel like there's some sort of argument or problem and two sides or more aren't getting along. They can't really negotiate well together and they need somebody else who doesn't have a side. They're supposed to be neutral, but sometimes the police will have to intervene if maybe there's a couple fighting at home. They will, they'll be called. Someone will call and say, oh, my neighbors are yelling. They're just really upset. And the cops will show up and intervene. So moving on to the next paragraph, needless to say, we don't have to even say this, but we're going to. Kota Yari's death sparked outrage all over the world. Oh, yeah. They, of course, were showing the clips on TV. It was a big deal. I think she did this to get a lot of worldwide attention. She really did sacrifice her life to try to change the human rights problems that they have in her country of Iran, where women aren't treated equally. Outrage is you're watching or hearing or listening to someone who's really got a strong reaction to something. It's really a lot of anger you see, maybe a little bit of shock, but it's an extreme reaction, outrage. Rage itself is really intense anger, sparked rage all over the world. We would say outrage all over the world for sure. I don't use it a lot except for when I write. Do you use the word outrage when you're speaking? Oh, I know how we use it, Tom.
Okay.
That was outrageous.
Right, as an adjective there.
Yeah, it's part of that word, outrageous.
Yeah, so shocking, so horrible, so bad that it's so surprising to us.
Yeah.
That's outrageous, rather, what the government did. They should be punished for that. We should, vote that person out of office next time. But yes, people in the world were outraged. And, of course, they tried to get the FIFA organization to intervene. And that generated conversations about how women in Iran are treated. So to generate just means to cause something to happen. They heard about this in the news. And so people had conversations. Yes, what's going on in Iran there? Yeah, you guys need to do something about this. That's an outrage. We can't have that happening. And other feminist movements in Iran have also garnered plenty of attention over the years, including the fight against the mandatory hijab, which is that scarf that the ladies wear. You see that all over Taiwan with the Indonesian ladies coming here to work. Lots of them wear them to practice their religion freely. And, of course, lots of people in Iran think, hey, we should be able to wear that, of our own free will. We can wear it if we want to. We shouldn't be forced to. So that's why they're fighting against the mandatory hijab, which means the government says, ladies, when you go out, you got to wear that thing. If you don't, you're going to get in big trouble.
Yeah. I was actually listening to the news this morning. They were talking about if you go back and look at photos of Iran back in the 70s, no women had hijabs on. And then as you look at the 80s, there was kind of a takeover in 78, 79. Anyway, things changed and a religious guy was then in charge of their country instead of just a typical politician. And you saw more and more women wearing hijabs. And now they're all wearing them. And if they don't wear them, they're arrested. They're treated badly. So with the help of social media, we've got a journalist who fled her own country, Iran, and started this movement called #MyStealthyFreedom. Stealth. You don't see it a lot. Stealth means it's really hard to see. I know we were making some sort of stealth airplane or stealth bomber where this military plane that was made in the States was very hard to detect. So we could fly into other countries and bomb them without them seeing. Only bad countries. We wouldn't bomb good countries. But stealthy just means something that's done in a way that people can't see or hear. You might get up really early on Christmas Day and your parents want you to stay in bed as long as possible, but you sneak. Remember that word? Sneak downstairs. You are very stealthy about how you go downstairs. The manner that you use is stealthy. So stealthy freedom, it's almost like you're trying to express yourself, but in a way that doesn't necessarily draw a lot of attention from authorities that could possibly get you arrested and thrown into jail.
Exactly. So she encouraged women to post images or pictures of themselves on the internet, to post pictures in public without a hijab on their heads. And this was later followed by another campaign encouraging women to wear white scarves on Wednesdays as a symbol of protest against the dress code. Dress code means official rules for how you're supposed to dress. I guess in Taiwan, lots of schools have dress codes.
Businesses have them a lot of times too.
You're supposed to wear a uniform to work. That can be good and bad. It's good that you don't have to decide what to wear every day. You just wear the same thing. Just keep it clean. And so, of course, they're protesting against this dress code of women having to wear the hijab. So this campaign here encourages women to wear a white scarf on Wednesday. Okay, so that means that you're protesting against this dress code if you decide to wear a white scarf on Wednesday.
Yeah, so if you had that, everybody would look at you and know that you supported freedom for women and that you were participating in the protest. It's often done where they have protests and people either wear something special. Remember the yellow vests that were protesting in France? They're still protesting, actually. They're just not getting a lot of attention. But yeah, they were protesting. And anyone who had a yellow vest on, you knew that they were protesting against the government. Now, although the battle for gender equality is far from over, a great many women in Iran are getting bolder, getting more courageous, and speaking up against the country's sexist laws. They're hoping that one day they'll no longer be treated as second-class citizens. Gender here just usually means it refers to either female or male. That is kind of changing these days. You know, if the guys get to do things, the girls should be able to do it, vice versa. As far as gender equality goes, it's mostly equal in the States, I think. But we've got a lot of countries that are still far behind that, especially in the Middle East. I know in Saudi Arabia, they just got permission for the women to drive cars.
Yeah, wish I could get my wife to drive, but she doesn't like the car we have.
But she gets to choose not to.
True, yeah, at least it's a free choice there. In many Islamic countries in the Middle East or possibly elsewhere, women don't have a lot of rights here, so of course they're being encouraged in Iran to get bolder and speak up against the sexist laws. You could also say speak out against. You could say that as well as a two-word verb phrase here, to speak up, to speak out, to let your voice be heard. And hopefully they're doing this so that someday they won't be treated as second-class citizens. And of course, there are a lot of arguments that can be made as to why that's a good thing, especially if you get more women in their workforce. Their economies will be stronger. They'll be able to, get rid of all sorts of problems with poverty and stuff like that. It just makes sense all around.
Yeah, so they're speaking up. They're standing up for what they believe. Speak up. Speak out. You could use that too, but you'll often see this verb phrase to speak up. Speak up. Actually, if you're in class and your teacher's asked a question and she calls on you to answer and you answer like this, I don't know. What? And it's a really soft voice, soft whisper. You'll often have people say, hey, speak up. Speak up. So you need to speak up if you have strong beliefs and you feel like something isn't fair to you or maybe a group of people. Hopefully one day these countries that we've been discussing, especially Iran, will have more freedom and they'll have more gender equality and people will be happier there, especially the women who've been treated for a long time like they're not as good as the men. Second class just means you're not being treated as fairly as the first class citizens. We actually don't use first class citizens, but you will hear second class. Oh, I feel like a second class citizen. Someone's not treating you fairly.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. We thank you so much for listening to us, and hopefully you learned something. And please join us again next time for another edition of our show. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Bye.
Bye.